Okay, let's talk about splenic authority. So, little disclaimer, in my human design chart, I am purely splenic. I just have my spleen and my root defined. So, splenic mechanics are going to feel differently depending on what you have defined in your chart. So, if you also have a defined heart, that will play into the mechanics. If you have, let's say, a self-projected channel, a channel that goes from the G center to the throat, that's going to factor into the process. You'll probably likely get splenic hits, but then you'll also have this self-projected talking experience that helps you kind of make sense of some of your splenic intuitions. If you're an ego manifester and you have a 4521, but you also have a defined spleen, you'll have splenic authority, but it'll look differently. So I wanted to talk about the pure splenic response as I experience it, because I have no other awareness. Basically, the root has no awareness. It's just pure energy, and it doesn't care how it uses its energy. So for me, it was confusing in the beginning when I was navigating this, because a lot of the books and the teachings will say that the spleen is, existential awareness in the now, which I agree with. But it also will say, the spleen whispers and it only tells you one time, so better not miss it. And I think that there is some information that's missing there. It's not the full picture. So for me, what I've noticed is that my spleen will give me a ping or a hit to do something, whether it's to do something or if it's in response to an invitation. So it'll give me a ping, and if I don't act on it right away, usually what happens is it gets a little louder. And then it might tell me again, and it'll get a little louder and a little louder, and then it will almost like scream at me sometimes, depending on the brevity of the situation. And if I don't then do something about it right at that moment, then the spleen completely silences, and it's almost like it says to me, well, you missed your chance, you'll have to wait for the next exit. So the way I think about how this is playing out is the spleen has no clarity over time. It's just aligning to the now moment, and the now moment and the trajectories that are branching off of this now moment are always changing. Like a GPS when it recalibrates, or like quantum theory when you make a choice and then there's now all these different branches in all these other different timelines. It's similar to that. And the way I think about it is it's actually inspired by the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the show Loki. If you're familiar with that show, if you're not, it's amazing. I 10 out of 10 recommend. But if you haven't seen it and you want to, I don't feel like I'm going to be giving too much away here. But essentially in the show, there is one main timeline that is being considered. And there are these people who are dedicated to preserving the integrity of that one timeline. And when there's a branch off of that timeline, they call it a variant. So if this is the main, let's say if this is the main timeline here, the flow of time is going this way. So let's say I'm going along and I'm here, and my spleen tells me, you need to act on this to keep you going on this timeline. But I ignore it, right? Then what will happen is I'll create basically a variant timeline for myself. And I will continue to go in this direction until my spleen gives me another thing that I can act upon to get me back to my main timeline. And usually what happens when I have to do this self-corrective process, I usually get sick because the spleen is all about primal body awareness, and if I ignore it, then it shows up in my body and I have to get myself back on track. But then what can happen is, let's say I'm just going through a shit storm of different things that are happening and I'm not very connected with my spleen or my body. I might end up I might get to this juncture and it might tell me, okay, act now. Oh, okay, you missed your exit. Gonna have to wait for the next one, right? Because let's say, like if I had acted maybe here, it would have caused me to go back. But now if I did the same action, it would actually cause me to do this. You see? So it's all about, like, to me, it's like always recalibrating to the new circumstances. Whereas somebody who has, let's say, emotional authority, or even like lunar authority, like a reflector, they're always gaining information over a period of time. So once they make a decision, it's like their body, their vessel, their form has already calibrated to the majority of the outcomes. It's almost like their body has seen like 70% of what the outcomes could be, and then they have like 70% clarity, and then they move forward, because an emotional authority or even like lunar authority is never going to be like 100%, whereas like the spleen is very much like, do this now, and it's kind of like an all or nothing thing. However, there's no logic, there's no reason, there's no way to explain it, which makes it very difficult in this world where we're conditioned to explain ourselves, and we're conditioned especially to make logical decisions. So especially like as a splenic person, you're automatically going to have an undefined solar plexus, so you're already going to have a tendency to avoid confrontation and keep the peace, and feeling like you can't explain your decisions to your friends, family, that can feel really overwhelming. So a lot of times our solar plexus will sabotage us because it's like, you don't know how to explain yourself. So we'll just keep on going with the status quo, but all the while we're actually ignoring our own authority. So hopefully that's helpful. Follow me on Instagram for more tips on splenic authority. And if you liked this, or if you're splenic and you relate, and this gave you like an aha moment, let me know.